As always, get to come here and talk about stuff I love. And hopefully, my goal here in talking to you all is hopefully just to name some stuff you probably already are very aware of, probably nothing new that I talk about, but maybe give you some new ways to think about it. And then maybe some nuggets, something that maybe feels valuable for you going forward to manage all of this craziness that 2020 has brought to us. The topic that I'm talking about is uncertainty, and so we are steeped in it this year. We have had to get used to it this year, and I just want to talk a little bit about what that actually is meaning for us. I think when I pulled things together, I always try to pull my notes together to think about how us as parents can better help our children with difficulty, right? So whatever the topic is, I'm trying to think through how us as parents can, take away a little bit of direction or understanding about our children so that we can parent to the best of our ability. In this topic, I think I'm focusing a little bit more on us as parents, and then as a very secondary item to identify some ways that we as parents can help our kids. But if we as parents aren't doing good, then our kids, out of just necessity, are not doing good. And so what I'm going to talk about today is more to you guys. It's more to me. I'm talking to me as much as I'm talking to each and every one of you. But we're all struggling. Whether we feel like we're struggling or not, we're all struggling. I use the analogy of we're all standing on the deck of a boat on an ocean that is unpredictable. It's stormy sometimes, it's clear sometimes, it's got big waves that come at us from nowhere, and we're trying to find our ballast all the time. And on top of that, we have to live, right? So we have this anxiety of not knowing how to keep our balance, and then all the other unpredictable things that are coming at us on top of that. And so I just want to maybe wrap some terms or wrap some awareness around some of that, and hopefully that's helpful. As always, at the end, if you have any comments or questions or just things you want to clarify more, please raise your hand, and I'll make some time for that. But in talking about uncertainty, I just made a note, lack of certainty, right? Because we live in this unconscious assumption that we know what's going to happen. And pre-2020, I think all of us would have said that for different periods of our life or different aspects of our life that we could have said, yeah, I know this is going to happen. And really we don't, but because we have these patterns in our life, we feel like we do. 2020 blew that out of the water for each and every one of us. And so what we're all going through, and I don't know if you guys have heard this term, but it's a grieving process, and we're all grieving. And there's a specific category of grief called ambiguous grief or ambiguous loss. Interestingly, that term was coined by a University of Minnesota researcher and professor. Her name is Dr. Pauline Boss. And she stumbled upon ambiguous loss back in the 70s when she was researching military families and prisoners of war and things like that. And she stumbled upon this type of loss that lacks closure. It is loss that occurs without closure or clear understanding. It is loss that is steeped in the unknown. And we are all going through that type of loss in very little and very big ways. There's ways that we can name it, like football seasons, potential winter sports seasons, proms, Christmas parties, Thanksgiving gatherings, all of those types of losses that are happening in very tangible and nameable ways. And then there's loss that's happening in very abstract and intangible ways that we are not able to name, but yet we're navigating. We're on that boat, we're trying to navigate it and make some sense of it, and it's throwing all of us off. And it's taking energy from all of us. I listed a couple of the things that the losses that we're experiencing. I mean, are you guys aware of loss? Do you think of it as grief? You thinking of it as loss? Good. It's important that we are able to name it, and I'll go into some of this stuff later. At the beginning, I want to just talk about kind of what it is that we're experiencing and give some language to it. And then at the end, I'm going to give a couple of different points of how could we help make this a process that's a little more manageable. I hesitate to say fix it, because that's not possible. But just to make this a little bit more understandable or manageable, and I'll wrap up with that. But some of the things that I was just had come to mind when I thought of the things that we have lost. The concept of safety, that's in question, security, connection for sure, and especially your kids. Adolescents in particular, it's such an important aspect. Any of you who have teens or preteens, that aspect, that concept of connection is hugely important, and that loss of connection is very, very vital. A sense of belonging, routine. The loss of routine is foundational rocking for most of us, and I'll touch on that a little bit later. And a sense of predictability. And those are just a few things that we have had loss for. Normalcy is the big one, right? We have all lost what normal is, and unpredictable is the new normal, and nobody operates well in that context. So to give you all a break and your kids a break, if you're struggling, you should be. And how can we struggle less? And we'll talk about that a little bit. I came across, in researching, I was coming across time after time, researchers, people who study this broadly, do research studies, who've done little micro research studies over the course of 2020 and have some data to report. The theme that has been coming up over and over is that uncertainty, or this ambiguity, is maybe the biggest psychological challenge to face us individually and collectively that has been able to be studied. This sense of offness, this need, this sense of not being able to make plans, to predict future, to have some normalcy. And that has created a base level of anxiety that is almost like, if I've used the term before, boiling the frog, right? So when you boil a frog, the temperature gets higher and higher, and the frog doesn't realize that it's getting higher, it's getting warmer and warmer in the pot. That's what's happening to us, is we are having to navigate this increasing sense of dysregulation, of lack of normalcy, and we're adapting and adapting and adapting. And what's happening is the water's getting warmer and warmer and warmer. Anxiety's building. Our kids are feeling it. We're feeling it. And at some point, when different life situations come in, our ability to navigate that, our margin is much less, because we've been having to navigate this increasing amount of anxiety. So if you've had situations where, why did that get to me so quickly? Or, what's going on here? You can start to understand that a little bit based on that. Moving forward is difficult when we don't know how to plan or prepare, right? And all of us have known that when we're trying to plan or prepare for the future here. So a couple of different things that I'm just going to throw at you, and again, may be helpful, may not be helpful in helping ourselves and our children to plan and understand hopefully this next very short period of time. The first is know your tolerance level and your kids' tolerance level. We, personality-wise, are hardwired either for structure and rigidity or for flow and lack of rigidity, right? If you're an Enneagram person, if you're a 1, you are structured for rigidity. You're structured for lists and order and linear and all of that kind of thing. So if you're in that category, if you're a Myers-Briggs person, if your last letter is J, you're probably in that same category. You're more the black and white thinker, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. If you're along those lines in regards to personality, this time may be a little bit more difficult for you, because you bank on knowing what's going to happen and being able to make a plan. And this period of time doesn't allow us to make a plan. Those of us who flow, and I'm saying us because I am absolutely somebody who flows, and having a plan is counterintuitive to me usually, it's a little bit easier for us. And so if we have friends who it's like, why is this not having as much of a toll on them as it is on me? Maybe think about the differences in personality. If you have children who have different personality wirings, you might be going to see that happening. I have an Enneagram 1 child, definitely a J, and she scrambles to make a plan and a contingency upon the contingency plan in this period of time. because she very much needs to know that she has an answer or a response for something that's going to happen. And that can be very difficult. So if you have a child like that, a little extra grace is really, really important. And I'll get to a little bit of some of the things that we can do when we have that happening, how we can manage that. Because if we're hardwired for that, don't try to change yourself. That's going to be energy that's poorly spent. Sorry, Yarda. Yeah, you just kind of, acceptance is a really powerful thing, right? And if I am somebody who is over here in the flow side, which I am, right? And I am, my last letter in my Myers-Briggs is a P. And so for me, I can flow. I have to be able to operate in structure and linear. I have to be able to do that to flow in life, right? But given my druthers, I would be over here in the flow side. And then the same way, those of us who, or those people who are more on the structured side, they have to learn how to flow. In their normal state, they will want to be more on the structured side, but in order to function in society, we have to be able to be in the gray at least a little bit. And in these ways, we can help our children, first by knowing what they are. This is just not a 2020 skill, this is a life skill. So that's a really helpful thing. For my youngest daughter, who is the one, who is the J, our thing is, she's like, yeah, Mom, I know, find the gray, find the gray, find the gray, find the gray. And so that is the thing that for her is a really, really important thing for her to be able to operate in unpredictability, and it helps her to lower her anxiety. So know your threshold, know your tolerance level, know your wiring, and respond accordingly. The second item, be specific about your uncertainty. The uncertainty that we feel sometimes is really ambiguous, it's really abstract. We may not be able to name it. Really try to. I'm going to encourage you to try to. One of the things that I hear from a lot of like my clients or even just friends and things is when we try to name it, sometimes we feel foolish about naming it. So for example, people will say, you know, I feel really foolish about whining about not being able to go on my trip to the Caribbean this year. First world problems, right? You know, they'll kind of minimize it and stuff like that. And I'm like, okay, great. You know, a little bit of gratitude and a little bit of awareness around that is good. However, if this is what your normal is, that is a loss and that is uncertainty, and name that. That's okay. If that is something that you expected in your life, a bit of gratitude that you get to do something like that is good to have, but also to give yourself permission to experience the loss and name the loss. Try not to minimize the loss. It still is a loss. It's a change of your pattern. It's a change of your expected plan for your near future. And to be able to do that, we are better able to work through something when we can name it, when we can identify what it is. If it remains abstract, we're scrambling for it. We don't know exactly what's going on and we don't know how to process through it. So for ourselves and for our children, to be able to give them time to name it and not minimize it. If your children are saying something that feels frivolous, but it's a loss for them, acknowledge that. And try not to just, you know, gloss over it like, oh, you'll be fine. If they're not fine, they're not fine. And let's let them not be fine for a little bit. That then leads to my next thing, which is the feelings stuff. So if you've ever heard me speak before, you're always going to hear me say, let our kids and ourselves acknowledge the feelings that we are experiencing. Name the feelings that we're experiencing. Feelings are never wrong. Never, 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 never wrong. That is an absolute. I don't like giving a lot of absolutes, but that is one of them. How we have the feeling can be wrong, but the feeling itself is never wrong. And so when we have a set of feelings like we have in this time, we're angry, right? Some of us are angry. How we're angry can be really, really unhealthy. That we're angry, totally fine. So let yourself be angry and examine the way that you're angry. Where is that anger taking you behaviorally? Where is that anger taking you in what beliefs that you form, in the way that you then walk out those beliefs? These are really important things for us to pay attention to and to be able to acknowledge and accept the feeling. Our children are in the same category. They don't know what they're feeling or why they're feeling. And for us to be able to say, you know what, let's work on that later, why you're feeling it or what you do in response to it, but talk to me about what that feeling's about. And help our kids name it. Littler kids, give them pictures, give them a feelings face little sheet. If you've seen a feelings face sheet, let them point out what they're feeling. Our older kids, let them use whatever language they want to, which might be a little bit cringy for some of us, but just, let them be able to ventilate that and name it. Try not to jump to fixing it right away. As parents, we want to fix our kids' uncomfortable feelings quickly, and try to resist that. Try to just let them sit in that for a minute and just have them explain it to you and talk through it. Usually what happens when we give our kids the space to do that, they will get to their own solution all by themselves. When we feel seen and heard and understood in our emotion, that is the bigger win than finding a solution for the emotion. Does that make sense? Most people, when they come into my office, if they feel heard, I don't have to do much more work beyond that, because they know what the next step is. They know what they need to do intuitively, but the fact that they feel heard and seen in that space is beyond valuable. And so we can offer that to our children, but first we have to be able to offer it to ourselves and our spouses. So be specific about your uncertainty and be able to name those emotions. Live in the present. Anxiety is future thinking, and anxiety is the name of the game for 2020 right now. We're all feeling different levels of anxiety and frustration in 2020. When we get into anxiety, what's happening is we are trying to identify and understand what is going to happen out there in the future. Anxiety thinking usually starts with the words, what if? What if this? What if that? What if school closes? What if sports get closed down? What if we can't have a Christmas party? What if we can't have Thanksgiving? What if Santa gets, all of these different things, right? What if, what if, what if, what if? When we start to hear those what if questions, we need to stop everything and say, okay, how are you feeling? What is happening? I don't know what's going to happen. Yep, that feels really awful, doesn't it? Yep, okay, let's talk about what that feels like. But when we start to grind through all the what if questions, we have just stepped into infinity. That is an infinity space with endless what ifs, and it really opens the floor to what's called catastrophized thinking. And we can what if into the worst possible outcomes, and that's when anxiety really starts to get some traction for ourselves and for our kids. And so listening for those what ifs and staying out of the future. That then brings me to the next point is, okay, so if we have to stay in the present and we have such uncertainty about the future, what do we do with that? You find things you can control, create some routines, and control the heck out of them. Give your kids the ability to do a routine, to control some sort of family routine, a new routine, whatever they want to do, and give them an ability to control it. Make sure you're pointing out things they still do have control over, or for ourselves, making sure that we're pointing out things that we still do have control over. I still get up for work. I still get up and get ready for my day, right? I have control over these things. I don't know what my day is going to look like, but I can control myself getting ready for it, right? So I'm going to make sure that I'm identifying those things that I do have the ability to have 100% control about, because that creates confidence, that creates a peaceful foundation in the midst of a very upheaval or unsteady set of circumstances out in the world. Control the controllables. You'll hear me say that a lot, especially in the face of anxiety, and that's outside of 2020. But when we have anxiety, that's a great little phrase to bring yourself back to. What can I control and how can I focus on that? It'll help bring a little bit more peace and clarity to what's going on in our life. Next point, focus on resiliency. So we've talked about resiliency in the past. Resiliency is the capacity to recover quickly from an adversity. Resiliency is really grounded in flexibility. So those flow people are probably going to come by that a little bit more readily, being able to be resilient or bounce back or get to plan B, C, D, or E quicker than maybe somebody who is more of a structured or rigid person. Identifying when you have been resilient in the past is a really important thing, right? Identifying we can be resilient. We have done things. We've been able to bounce before. We've been able to pivot before. We use that word a lot. That's kind of a 2020 term. Rigidity causes anxiety. So if we have a rigid outcome in mind and we need that outcome to happen in order for our happiness to be there, we have just signed ourselves up for some letdown and some probably frustration and anxiety. So flexibility is the name of the game. Both and thinking is something that is a little bit of an abstract concept, but is something that I would encourage you to, give some thought to. Both and thinking is very uncommon in our Western culture. We don't like that type of thinking. We like to know the outcome. We like to know what we're going to be getting. We like to know the plan. We like to have understanding. And that's very much a Western culture thing. We are a mastery orientation culture. We like to move toward the mastery of things. And there's nothing wrong with that. But we also need to have the ability to balance it with holding in tension the unknowns, the things that we don't have control over and we don't know how to find the answers for. When we can have some comfort or some proficiency in both and thinking, we can navigate the unknown so much better. When our kids come to us and say, will school be shut down? I'm not sure. That might feel bad. Yeah, it might. But it might be okay too. Yeah, it might be. But which one will it be? I'm not sure. And to be able to just kind of sit in that and to be okay with that. And for some of us, that's a little gear grinding. And if that's you, pay attention to that. That's a work zone for you. If you've got a kid who needs that, that outcome, that knowing of the outcome and that, black and white thinking, pay attention to ways that I can introduce both and thinking to that child. Black and white thinking isn't our friend in this 2020 chaos that we're in. Final point, stay connected. That's a no-brainer, but just wanted to bring it up. Stay connected in whatever way that you can. As long as we can gather, let's gather and do it safely. If we have to stay connected by text, by phone, by video, stay connected. Call up grandma on the FaceTime or whatever. It's not ideal. It's not the best. Yes. But we're staying connected. Yes. That's both and thinking, by the way. We are connected, not the way we want to be, but it's something. And we as people, isolation is one of the most problematic things also in this time. When we start to get stuck in our head and stuck in really dysfunctional thinking patterns, we get into rabbit holes that are really, really dangerous to get into. And our kids are susceptible to that as well. And so encouraging your kids to stay connected, you staying connected. There's another one where know your threshold. So if you're an introvert, don't think you have to all of a sudden be extroverted level connected. Like maintain your personality style and you're staying connected, but do so and be intentional about doing it. I want to wrap up with something that a colleague of mine was bringing up when we do consult meetings a time or two a week, and so we just get to process. I get to have therapy once or twice a week with my colleagues, which is wonderful. But one of them brought up some different ways of looking at what's happening with 2020. And this is the final thing that I want to maybe invite you to think through, is the meaning we're making of what's happening here. What meaning are you making? Is this meaning something that is catastrophized, that it is all horrible, that we're trying to be controlled, that everything's going terrible, that we are blowing up? Is that the meaning that you're making internally, and maybe that's spilling over into your children? Be very aware of that. The Bible says, Jeremiah 29:11 says that he gives us a hope and a future. That is not catastrophized thinking. That is not the directive that we're given. We're given the directive of hope. We are given the directive to trust that God has a good plan for us. And for us to be able to identify, if I'm thinking and assuming and making meaning of all of this that is catastrophized and negative, then I am directly in opposition to the promise that I am given in the Word. And I need to do some work in myself in order that I don't start spilling that around to my children or my spouse or the people around me. The meaning making is vital. The term that one of my colleagues used was, we are in hospice and prenatal at the same time. We are in the tomb and the womb at the same time. And that just really made me think, that we are dying to the old order that we had, that we don't have that anymore. And there's no way to get that back. We are in a transition time which is not comfortable for anyone. It's more comfortable for the flow people, but it's not comfortable for anyone. And so if you think about transition, you think about moving through the bumpy to the new, what we expect of what's coming is going to impact how we behave. And our expectation that then translates into our behavior can be that of hope and goodness and better, or it can be that of catastrophizing and separateness and hate and all kinds of things. We need to be very intentional about the meaning we're making so that the way we're behaving is in line with what the directive of our Father, that the Word says that we love, and that we are expecting good things for us through this. And because we're uncomfortable does not mean that good things aren't coming. All of us mamas who were uncomfortable in birth expected good things, right? So because we have discomfort does not mean that a bad end is coming. And for us as parents, this is a really, really important one to collapse into the hope. And it is also a very, very big challenge for us as human beings to be able to identify discomfort as the beginning of better things, of the breaking of old order and the opportunity to reorder in a way that is closer to what God intends for us to be living as ambassadors to the world, right? As Christians and as believers. So there you have it. This is kind of my thoughts on uncertainty. Hopefully there's a little bit in there that is helpful for you guys. Any thoughts or questions or? Yeah.
Question on name. You said naming it.
Uh-huh.
Give me an example of something you would name.
Yep.
The benefit of naming it.
Yep.
Acknowledging it. And then do you share that or how do you?
Yep. So if you ever you're walking through your day, or you're just kind of you're feeling agitated, right? So you're bugged. To name that, to be able to say, I don't know what's going on. I don't know how to identify where this came from or why it's here. Right now I'm feeling bugged, irritated, a little frustrated. And to simply name it and to be okay with not knowing what I need to do to solve it, that's where I'm at right now, just kind of accepting that. When we can name it, we open up clarity, we open up our mind's ability to then kind of identify and pinpoint, like, what do I need to do with that? I'm thinking, as you say that, I'm thinking of, I work with people, all kinds of things, but I'm thinking of eating disordered, so for whatever that's worth. But when I have people who eat their feelings, right? So I'm feeling irritated, agitated, anxious, whatever, and I move toward the pantry. What I have them do is sit and name what they're feeling first. So they have to write down all the things they're feeling. I'm frustrated, I'm agitated, I'm jumpy, I'm prickly, I want to bite someone's head off, right? And when we name that, then I can say, was there anything on there about hunger? No. Oh, okay. So going to the pantry is not going to solve it. Probably not. Okay. So, and then we can kind of open up the next thing to do with it. But usually it's those types of out there in the atmosphere types of feelings that are outside of our ability to name. And it takes some practice, but usually those are the things that are bugging us the most. And we need to be able to sit with ourselves, and at the very least, if I don't even know how to name it, to be able to say something's going on. That is valuable because I've given myself permission to be off. So. All right. Well, thank you. I really appreciate you guys allowing me to come in and speak. Best of luck to you.